भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaskar my dear friends. This is video number 2 on the life beyond death. This video starts with the apparitions. In the event of sudden death associated with pain, quite a few particles of the physical body, sthul sharir, cling to the astral body, suksham sharir, as a consequence of which the soul retains the characteristics of both the former living as well as the astral being. It is therefore has some physical as well as astral sukshma components. Such souls at times become visible to the living person as apparitions. However, this is not true about a person dying a natural death. In order to make themselves visible, the latter category of spirits have to make great efforts and carry out specific spiritual exercises. Persons dying of unnatural death, on the other hand, exist as spirits, ghosts, and they are unable to sleep because of troubled emotional state, seeking opportunities for taking revenge or fulfillment of insatiated desires through the body of a living person. They hover around old peepal trees, caves, ruins, or some reservoir of water. They make their presence felt to the desired person or persons at opportune moments. The exorcists, tantrics bring such spirits under their control with the help of witchcraft and make them work like slaves. The spirits, however, do not work willingly for the exorcist. They remain ever resentful and even kill their captors in unguarded moments. No one likes to be in bondage. The spirits perform like the caged lion in a circus. The spirits generally tend to stay at a particular place and do not change their abode frequently unless there is some specific reason to do so. The rest before rebirth. The souls of modest persons and of those having religious disposition, severe links with the earlier worldly milieu after cremation and easily reconciled to the changed environment. Detaching themselves from the past, they easily fall asleep for recuperation. Nature has not specified any fixed duration for this period of rest. It depends on the state of spiritual health of the soul. As children and hard-working persons need a longer period of sleep and rest, so do the souls in various states of spiritual health. Generally, a duration up to 3 years is found sufficient for this rest. During the first year, the soul sleeps soundly, within which it is able to recuperate from the exhaustion of earlier life, and the finer perceptions of the new astral body begin to react efficiently to the requirement of new levels of sentience. In the succeeded second year of rest, The soul recapitulates the wrong deeds, sins of earlier existence, and prepares itself for working in the new environment in the light of past experiences. The third year is spent in looking for milieu in which it desires to return to this world by taking birth in a new body. The duration mentioned here are averages. Occasionally, in specific cases, persons have been found taking rebirth even after 6 months, whereas others have taken as long as 5 years. The maximum age periods of existence of spirits, Preet, is believed to be 12 years. Thus, the maximum gap between the death of a person and rebirth could be taken as 12 years. Where is the world beyond? It would soon become clear that the world in which the soul lives after the death in the material world is not a remote existence somewhere far above in the space. We know, for instance, that X rays penetrate through solid objects, whereas for a living person, even a wall restricts movements, heat and cold to pass through physical barriers to a great extent. That is to say, the movements of extra sensory finer elements are not restricted by physical objects. On the other hand, though material barriers obstruct our activities, we hardly ever feel the presence of the finer elements of nature surrounding us. Thus, without being conscious of it, we move around freely like a fish in this vast ocean of air enveloping us. The souls of the dead are composed of such extrasensory finer elements and therefore have a total freedom of movement in this world. The world beyond does not have an existence in some remote part of space. It is a world within this world itself. The world of souls is omnipresent on this very earth and in the cosmic space beyond this planet. Residents of the other world can choose their abode at will anywhere on earth, in water, on hills, planets, stars, or intervening cosmic space, and make arrangements for their existence according to their convenience. One must be aware that the soul also carries with it the ideas, traits, convictions, and experiences of mortal life. Since while living, man is engaged in many activities of housing, clothing, and food throughout life, habits and convictions pertaining to these functions take deep roots in his psyche, which is an integral part of the soul. It is difficult for a common man to conceptualize a life without a house, food, and clothing. The soul assumes a body from known in the spiritual parlance as Sukshma Sarira. It acquires sense perceptions, indriyas, corresponding to those in use while living according to the totality of convictions of the person whose body it was associated with before death. The habits and convictions also produce virtual house, food and clothes, etc. as desired. The activities of living, eating and wearing clothes are, however, imaginary since a non-material being does not require material conveniences, nor can it make use of them. The souls which assume the state of ghost and spirit, breath, because of strong worldly links, choose specific places described later for their stay. In the normal course, the other souls select any place for their living and have no specific choice. The difference in sex is retained, though this too is conceptual in the astral body. The effeminate man and masculine women chose the desired sexual status after a brief period of asexuality, genderlessness. In the succeeding birth, the individual adopts the sex according to this changed outlook. Such events are, however, exceptions to the norm. Generally, very few are interested in changing the gender. In the other world, one becomes free of all physical handicaps of this life. For instance, retarded, crippled, and physically disabled individuals are relieved of their infirmity in the astral body since such shortcomings are possible in the physical existence only. Besides, physical disabilities are temporal and for duration of one life only. They are not carried forward from the preceding life cycle. For this reason, they have no impact on the psyche, which is a component of astral body. In the astral world, whenever desired, a soul can interact with another soul. However, the souls perceive each other only for exchange of thoughts and ideas. This interception, the interperception and telepathic interaction is possible only when the souls themselves intend to do so. Otherwise, they remain totally unaware of presence of each other. This meeting between the two souls takes place as an interaction of two energy norms. During the intercommunication, the souls are indifferent to each other's body forms, since in the astral world these have no relevance whatsoever. Similarly, the name, clothes, and food too being each soul's prerogative and personal conceptions cannot be seen by others. It is, however, possible to know whether one is happy or unhappy, peaceful or troubled from a kind of glow emanating from the astral body. The concepts of heaven or hell discussed later too are soul's own and are invisible to others. Though the astral bodies can communicate with each other in this manner, it is not possible for them to share happiness or sorrow. Some souls prefer to live with the deceased person and relatives and form communities. Such communes, however, exist only in the lower state of astral world. Considering the futility of permanent associations in course of several cycles of life and death, the elevated souls prefer to live in isolation and make solitary endeavor for further enlightenment. The souls do not remain confined to geographical boundaries, nor they are under the command of some superior entities. They are controlled by their own conscience. The spiritual benefits of rites and rituals like Shraddha, Tarpan, etc., and those performed for the dead like placing wreaths or building monuments for the deceased accrue to the dear ones in the world only. These acts of virtue or donations hardly help the souls living in the astral world since they are not performed by the latter. It is an established law of spirituality that fruits of virtue are transferable. Nevertheless, such expressions of gratitude and reciprocations of goodwill by the survivors of the family do provide a sense of contentment to the departed soul. Whenever it is feasible and opportune, it tries to help extrasensory. The spiritual benefits of rites and rituals like Shraddha, Tarpan, etc., and those performed for the Dead, like placing wreaths or building monuments for the deceased, accrue to the dear ones in this world only. These acts of virtue or donations hardly help the souls living in the astral world, since they are not performed by the latter. It is an established law of spirituality that fruits of virtue are non transferable. Nevertheless, such expressions of gratitude and reciprocation of goodwill by the survivors of the family do provide a sense of contentment to the departed soul. However, it is feasible and opportune. It tries to help extrasensory. For example, by providing an inspiratory thought, the departed souls try to help the former near and dear ones in this manner. Acts of mourning and expressions of sorrow hurt the departed souls. It disturbs their peace. It is therefore advisable to severe feelings of attachment from the dead as early as possible and only pray to God for them to rest in peace. Heaven and hell. God is very kind and merciful. He has given total freedom to the human beings in this world to find the absolute truth and a state of absolute bliss by following a self-chosen course of action. Neither does God become annoyed with those who commit mistakes, sins, nor does he punish anyone disapprovingly. The individual reaps the fruits of one's own doing. The system created by God permits the beings to learn from their own experience and progressively qualify for an improved status in the astral world. Heaven and hell have also been created for this very purpose. While pronouncing a sentence, a judge has no ill will towards the accused. On the contrary, he or she sincerely hopes that the person being punished appreciates the consequences of the committed criminal act and learning a lesson then there from would spend the future life in an upright manner. God is the supreme judge of cosmos. All faiths of the world are unanimous in the view that after death the soul of the dead comes across either heaven or hell. Hence, there should not be any doubt about this concept. The Hindu spirituality also maintains that in between death and rebirth in the next life, one has to go through the experience of heaven and hell. By the will of God, this system enables the being to make amends for the past misdeeds so that in the future course the being is able to avoid pitfalls. The span of time spent by the soul in the astral world is about 3 years or more, depending upon the discretion of the invisible supreme being. About one third of this time is spent in sleeping and taking rest. Hence, the prayer for the soul to rest in peace. This period of rest is needed because the strains of living in this world make the soul of the being much tired. When it comes to take leave of the body at the time of death, the soul is so exhausted that it is more or less unconscious, inactive. Hence, immediately after death, being inactive and devoid of sensitivity, it is not in a position to feel the full impact of the corrective punishment it is due to receive. A patient undergoing surgery under the sedation does not feel any pain. On completion of this initial period of rest, during the next one-third period of its stay in the astral world, the soul awakens with renewed freshness. During this later period, the soul reviews the bad and good deeds it has been associated with while inhabiting the body of the deceased person as heaven or hell. The natural system of divine justice does not punish or reward a person immediately after committal of an act of virtue or sin. There is a time lag between the actions, mental, verbal, physical, and reactions, rewards, and punishments as heaven and hell. As future acquisitions of fruits is ascertained while sowing the seeds. The ultimate reactions, karma, fall of good and bad activities in thoughts, words, and deeds become integrally attached to the soul in concentric layers, which unfold one after the other at the appropriate time, like sowing of seeds of different plants which take their own time to mature and bear fruit. Acts of virtue and sin produce the resultant at appropriate time. After the soul awakens, the imprints of various good and bad deeds do not merely remain dormant in the stories of memory. Each of these manifests into a consequential product. In course of our life, we commit so many good and bad deeds which we forget in due course of time. But the soul as a witness to everything within self keeps a meticulous record. For instance, a thief does not listen to the voice of conscience while committing theft. Let us also presume that the stealing goes unnoticed and thereby unpunished in this world, but in the field of soul it is sown as a seed after some time, whereas the theft is erased from the working memory in life. In the file of soul, it is kept as a permanent record. When a seed is sown, it grows into a tree quite different in shape and size. So does an act of sin transform into misery of hell. Hell has been described in a variety of ways in the scriptural literature of various faiths, whereas for Hindus, the description of hell are associated with terms like Kumbipak, Vaitrani, Roro. The Mohammedans know it as Dozak. The writer of this book holds the view that it is possible for each being to have a specific hell of one's own. In this way, all souls could have had a many numbers of hell after death. After each cycle of life and death, and in future will continue to have new hell. It is quite logical since hell has a connotation related to the personal circumstantial view of the individual in life, which obviously differ from person to person. A doctor would feel suffocated in a room filled with filth, whereas a sweeper may hardly take notice of the foul smell. A death sentence which a martyr hears with a smile terrifies others. A sensitive person would find it difficult to forget a minor insult, whereas the most disgraceful treatment given to a thick-skinned person may not create any reaction in later. Therefore, for individuals having different levels of insensitivity, different types of hell would be required. A standard modest of hell would not serve the purpose. Scriptures also mention about the imageries of death. Yamdut who forcibly drag the soul towards the hell. These so-called messengers of death are not independent beings but are in fact mental images, manas putras created by the soul of the dead itself. In course of the sequential growth of the seeds of activities, karma, the inner self also produces enforcers of divine justice. The lifespan of these divine prosecutors depends upon the period for which the being is required to live in hell. Having accompanied their job, they become extinct. The wardens created for enforcement of punishment to a particular soul do not stay longer to punish someone else. As a matter of fact, in the astral world, all material life ceases to exist and the spiritual one unfolds. According to spiritual scientists, the conscious mind which dwells on material things dies, but the supraliminal survives. In the latter, it brings to the surface awareness of facts and consequences of activities of life in their true perspective. In this state of mind, the soul becomes totally deprived of the argumentative power of the liar and logician, which in normal course of life justifies each and every action taken by man. The tendency to suppress truth thus leaves the mind altogether. The field within the inner and productive as the conscious mind is while operating for material achievements during life. In material life on this earth, the mental body Sukshma Sharir of man coexisting with the physical body has four components of mind, namely man, the source of desire, longings and aspirations, buddhi, the discriminative faculty which deliberates, takes decisions and seeks a course of action. Chitta, which stores inherent traits, habits, inclinations and temperament, and ahankar, appraisal of a person for oneself in material world, that is that he is so and so, rich or poor, wretched or fortunate, foolish or intelligent, etc. When man is physically alive, the mental body remains only partly active, with the first two exterior cells of mind, namely man and buddhi, governing the activities of physical body. The remaining two secret compartments, gupta, mastiska, remain subconscious when man is in the living state. The mesmerist in fact puts the external mind, man and buddhi to sleep and give hypnotic suggestions to the inner component chitta and ahankar, which creates a lifelike physical experience for the subject. For instance, if the subject is told that he or she is swimming, the former actually believes and feels involved in the act of swimming. The same holds true in experience of heaven and hell in the life after death. The internal mind is made to experience the events of hell by autosuggestion, and soul, which is a non-material entity, feels miserable. Thus hell and enforcers of divine justice perceived beyond death do not have an independent existence, nor do there exist independent courts of law for divine justice and related office personnel. Innumerable living beings die at each moment. Rendering justice to them would require a huge complex establishment. There is absolutely no feasibility of such a complex setup for dealing with innumerable living beings of this cosmos. The scriptures mention that Yam is the deity who takes a decision on allotting heaven or hell to the soul of the dead on the basis of the record of its good or bad deeds, maintained by Chitragupta in his code. In Sanskrit dictionary, Yama stands for disciplining one's own self, and Chitragupta stands for the Chitta, which is secret or hidden. That is to say, the chitta keeps the record and self-control. Atma Niyantran delivers the judgment, thus each being has a hell of its own, which becomes extinct the moment the soul returns to be reborn in another body. When the resultant of sins deeply ingrained in the psyche becomes illumined, the soul is forced to take cognizance of them. Let us try to understand the concept of Yamduts. The emissaries of death, attracted by fire, a month appears forcibly drawn towards it by some independent entity. Though this act of sect is simply self-immolation. Similarly, when the astral body is brought to divine justice and undergoes punishment on its own, it has the impression of being forced to do so by aliens. The deliverers of divine justice would naturally appear in form, shape, complexion, and description conforming to the faith and religious beliefs to which the person subscribed while living. They would also converse with the soul of the dead in its own language. The enforcers of divine justice may also be conceptualized as the effulgence of sanskars. Sanskars ka page uncovered on death, which necessarily confront the soul, whether it likes it or not. Who would like to accept and face results of one's own misdeeds in order to punish and reform itself? The inner self produces an exclusive hell within, wherein traits accumulated from activities of previous life becomes personified as living images, and soul is subjected to torment, anguish, and humiliation. The inferno creates a lifeline perception of physical suffering, such as being roasted, or an intense experience of remorse, mortification, and embarrassment. The kind and degree of punishment would depend on the emotional susceptibility of the individual. The purpose of this treatment in hell is to make the being suffer so that it is able to learn a lesson by correlating sinful deeds with their ultimate consequence. The duration and degree of punishment also depends on the requirement of the being for reformation. As is the course of justice in this world, the limits of hellish treatment are decided by the gravity of crime. In order to punish a habitual criminal who repeats mistakes in successive life cycles, heavy punishment is designed. In this way, the soul gets cleaned of all serious sins one by one, which appear successively and fade out after producing the desired effect. The Suksham Srira too has astral sense organs and a mind analogous to the living person. For physically committed sins, the physical counterpart, and for the evil thoughts, the mind of the astral spiritual body are made to suffer. On our on ever eating or consuming bad food, the person himself suffers for his folly. So does the inner self have an inbuilt arrangement of self-punishment for evil deeds. Sinful acts which are not kept secret are generally punished for in this very world, whereas for the remaining, the being has to undergo suffering in the astral world. The provision of confession in Christianity is to enable the person to unburden the soul of sins kept as secret. Divinity has established this system to enable the being to make penance for most of the grievous sins and proceed for the next birth as a pious being without the burden of consequences of sins committed in previous life. The commander-in-chief does not permit a wounded soldier to go back to the front till he recuperates, since otherwise he would not serve his purpose and instead of fighting would be preoccupied with the injury. For the similar reason, barring a few exceptions discussed later in the chapter on rebirth, Most of the sins of the individuals are wiped out after the reformatory treatment and the being proceeds for the next birth with a clean slate. The advantage of hell does not lie merely in weakening the impact of sins on the soul but is also reformatory. It relieves the living being from past evil habits in future life and make it remember the consequences. The voice of conscience is in fact a memory of this lesson. Thieves, evildoers, and murderers become restive while committing the crime. It indicates the faint recollection of punishments suffered in hell for similar deeds in earlier life. But alas, people do not pay heed to their voice of conscience and fall again and again in the trap of sin.